Welcome back, everyone. As you probably guessed from the title of the video, this is the firearm that we are going over today. It is one of the newer offerings for Glock, at least as of when I'm filming this. This is the Gen 5 Glock 21 MOS. So that means a few things. Gen 5 means that it has the modernized features that went back to the 2-pin design, which is what the Gen 2s had. Also no finger grooves, forward serrations, and of course the MOS there has the MOS optic system, which allows you guys to mount any type of optics with the plates that they do come with. Now I should note this one here came with just an RMR plate, but some of my older MOS guns have come with a myriad of optics plates. I'm not sure if Glock has changed that, like a rolling change in the line, but of course there are a million aftermarket plates out there available for the gun because Glock is Glock. That is definitely one of the advantages of it. Another thing that they changed with the Gen 5 was the barrel. So it has the Glock Marksman barrel. Now, Glocks have always had polygonal or polygonal rifling in their barrels. This one here has changed it out a little bit, and it's sort of like a hybrid between polygonal and traditional rifling. They claim that it's improved accuracy. We will get to that later on in the review, but before we do that, we're going to go over all the different details of it, break it down, show you guys up close and personal all of the things that you'd want to know if you were considering this gun. And then of course at the end we'll let you know how it's performed reliability wise, accuracy wise, what the cost is, etc. Before continuing on, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that is American Hartford Gold. Anybody who's watched the channel knows that I am not a huge fan of fiat currency, and that is an understatement. There's a plethora of reasons why that might be. Constant inflation, banks failing, the government threatening to bring about a digital currency. And as firearms owners know, you cannot count on the government for your protection. Our friends at American Hartford Gold can help you diversify your portfolio from just fiat-based currency to physical gold and silver, so that way you diversify that risk across the board. American Hartford Gold has thousands of 5-star ratings and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. Plus they support content like this, which certainly is not the case with all companies, as many of you know. When you reach out to them now, they will give you up to $5,000 in free gold or silver. And you can let them know that I sent you by texting code GEAR to the number here on your screen, or giving them a call at 866-856-2097. Again, that is 866-856-2097, or text GEAR to 65532. Now back to the video. Getting into the details of the gun, we will start at the bottom and work our way forward for some semblance of order. So it does come with 3 magazines. That is one thing that's nice about the Gen 5s. Standard capacity, 13 round, and of course they do have band state for those of you guys who live behind enemy lines. Is cut for both sides because of course our magazine catch is reversible. So if you're a lefty out there, you can swap it around and the mag is cut for both. Some of the older mags actually aren't cut that way, so if you're a lefty, just kind of pay attention to that if you're buying some. Additionally, the Gen 5s have that upswept base plate there, which is nice. It gives you a better area to purchase if you have a double feed and need to grip and rip it out. Now, moving that aside, you guys will see our magwell there. The Gen 5s have a pretty decent magwell built right into the frame. Some of the earlier ones had that little cutout up front that was stupid. Glock has stopped doing that, and they've listened to demand from the crowd who's been purchasing them and made that adjustment. So good on Glock for that. And one thing it also does here is, this is something I've talked about in other videos, but this little flare right here at the front, essentially where your pinky lines up on the grip. One thing that a lot of companies are doing now, particularly with optics cut guns, is putting that in there, because what it does is as you put pressure with your pinky, it brings the gun down a little bit. And when people miss optics in terms of trying to find the dot and they're searching for it, the dot is almost always high. So a lot of companies are putting that on there, so that way it kind of forces you to dip the nose of the gun down, so that way you more consistently get your dot. Continuing on up, the grip texture on the Gen 5s is pretty good. I honestly have no complaints about it at all. One thing about the the Glock 21 in specific in Gen 5 is that it still is pretty big. Now I have extra large hands in most gloves in terms of brands, and you guys can see how my hands get on there. Pretty big overall. A lot of folks, even without any back straps added, are probably going to have some issues with the size of the gun. Now, obviously, as I just intimated, it does come with 2 back straps that you can swap it out with that give you an extra beaver tail to it. Additionally, it does increase the circumference of it. So if you have huge hands, you know, if you're like 6'6", 6'8", something like that, and you really want to make it bigger so that way you have more area to fill in, you can do so with the Glocks. I definitely do dig that feature. A little bit of modularity. Glock doesn't do a lot of innovation, but that's one of the things they have done well. Continuing on up, our slide catch and slide release is ambidextrous. Now, again, just like I mentioned earlier with the cutouts that were on some of the earlier Glocks, some of these on the earlier Glocks were very flared out, and myself and many others, when gripping with that high thumb grip, were activating it and getting either false slide lock or no slide lock. So Glock went back to the drawing board and changed the geometry on these, and as you can see, much slimmer now. Very similar to what we had with the Gen 4s and the Gen 3s. It's very tight in there, and it's almost impossible to accidentally actuate. Now, the con of that is, in order to send the slide home, you definitely can miss it, particularly if your hands are sweaty, bloody, whatever the case may be. So if that is the thing, you may want to consider running the slide by pulling it and letting it go. But I absolutely prefer that versus the larger ones that were on some of the earlier Gen 5s. Of course, with the Gen 5s, we also don't have any finger grooves up front. Some folks like finger grooves, some folks don't. I actually don't mind them at all. However, I think the consensus by most folks is just leave them off, and you don't really need them anyway. So I guess I'm in that camp as well. Continuing on to the trigger, the Glock did change their triggers on the Gen 5s, however, not all that much. It's basically still a Glock trigger, which, in my opinion, Glock triggers are absolutely fine. I don't change them out. On my defensive guns, I leave them as is. I think they're perfectly shootable, but you have a lot of that take up, and then you sort of hit a mushy wall, and you roll through the wall a little bit. Breaks right at 5.5 pounds on my scale, 5 to 5.5, and then the reset. Very tactile, very audible, a little bit longer than some of the other modern guns out there. But again, you're back on the wall, and you roll through the mush. It's not super crisp. But I always say, honestly, I don't think a factory Glock trigger is going to hold back a good shooter from shooting well. Now, for some new shooters, it definitely can be a problem, but for most folks, it won't be, I guess is the best way to say it. Continuing on forward, up here on our rail, we have that single Glock rail versus a 1913 rail that most pistols have. Years ago, that used to be kind of an issue because it was just different in in 1913, or Picatinny is universal. That said, these days, basically, if there is a pistol light manufacturer out there, they make a Glock rail adapter, or they just make their standard adapter fit with Glocks just because they're so common. So that definitely is one of the advantages that Glock has, is sort of the universality of it. Continuing on up here to our slides, we do have forward serrations on the Gen 5s. That is a new thing. That's definitely important if you're going to be running optics. We didn't run optics during this review simply because I've tested the Glock MOS system many times, and it's fine. There's pros and cons to it, but I suppose we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the review, but it's perfectly fine. That said, the slide does have their new, for Gen 5 anyway, NDLC finish. Very good corrosion resistance. As you guys can see, we've had no issues with rust or anything like that on the gun. It's a little bit shiny. Some folks like it a little bit more dull. I personally don't really care. But what it is it is a version of nitriding or nitrocarburizing. So what it does is give you good surface hardness, good corrosion resistance, good wear, good lubricity as well. It's just an overall very good finish, so you will not hear me complaining about it. Continuing on back, we do have our sights swapped out for some XS optics height sights. And the reason for that is, in case I want to put an optic on it down the road, we can go with those. And of course, the reason we swapped them in the first place is because the factory sights on Glock pistols are absolutely terrible. It is absolutely something that, in my opinion, Glock should not ship their guns with. I think they should be embarrassed. They consider themselves to be perfection. The sights are not only plastic, which they are, they also don't shoot point of aim, point of impact. It's just, all in all, a very bad sighting picture. And again, I've been saying this for years. It's one of the reasons Glock doesn't like me, but it's insane, especially when you consider what other competitive offerings offer for a similar price point or even a lower price point. The fact that they're putting those on there is just not good. Now, again, one of the beauties of Glock being Glock is that replacements are very easy to find. Again, we have these XS sights on here. As you can see, that nice square notch there on a rear and subdued tritium inserts, as well as the bright front green optics ring, circle ring around the tritium up front. Very good setting system, so we've had no issues with it. Once we swapped them out, just get those factory ones off there. They're trash. For disassembly and maintenance, we've already removed the magazine. Now we're going to lock the slide back and make sure that it is clear, and it is, as you guys can see. We'll let the slide go home, point in a safe direction, pull the trigger, pull back on the slide about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, pull down on these two tabs, release. The slide will come off. At this point, we can take our guide rod and spring out. Now the guide rod and spring, it is a dual spring system, so that is one nice thing. Glock started that with the Gen 4s, and they've continued it with the Gen 5s. It makes the gun shoot a little bit softer in my opinion, and I am a fan. Taking out our Glock marksman barrel there, you guys can see some honest wear on it overall, but it still I should say, has that NDLC finish on there, so it's good corrosion resistance all around. And one thing about the finish is that it does penetrate into the metal itself, so even if you see like here, the finish looks worn, it's actually, the properties of the finish are still in the metal, so definitely good to go on that front. We have a nice wide feed ramp, as you guys can see, and it's also opened up here on the sides, which that's a little bit new for the Glock 21s, but that's likely due to just the large size of a 45 ball projectile. You can see just how it's going to sit when it's going in there, so that's probably why they opened it up on the sides. But has that new polygonal rifling that I suppose we'll probably touch on a little bit later on in the review. But looking at the inside of the slide, everything's pretty clean. No machine marks at all, exactly as you would expect with Glock. Here we have their improved striker safety, so that's changed a little bit with the Gen 4s and Gen 5s. All in all though, looks clean. No issues with it at all. Maintenance on Glocks is very, very simple. Basically just wipe it all down, lubricate it. We have a video on that from probably about 10 or 12 years ago now at this point that is probably horrible to watch. I'm sure some of you guys are going to go do it now. But looking in the inside of the frame, nothing fancy at all with the Glocks. It's pretty standard stuff over the years. Now the trigger components on the Gen 5 are different if you're looking for aftermarket solutions or something like that. So just make sure you specify that it is a Gen 5. But the basic overlay of the Glock system has remained the same since the 1980s. That sort of is one of the beauties of it. And basically you just line your slide back up, run the action, and you're back in business. Now that we've got up close and personal on it, a few things to note before we close the video out. First, this did come from our friends at Firearms Depot, so definitely want to thank them for that. Glock does not like this channel at all. They despise me, and that's just fine by me, but I generally like their guns. So thanks to the folks at Firearms Depot. They also provided the ammunition that we've used throughout this video. Speaking of that, the gun right now has just over 1,000 rounds through it. We've had 3 malfunctions. So we had 2 using older Gen 2 Glock 21 magazines, and those were the first 2 I had in probably like the first 900 rounds, and I just attributed it to being a older design magazine. However, we just had one last week with it using the Gen 5 magazine, so the most current one. So right now we have 3 malfunctions out of just over 1,000 rounds. Double feed. Ooh, it's a spicy one. Same double feed. Or it's not feeding actually. Doesn't like this mag, I don't think. I'm not sure if I locked the slide back in my hand or not. Doesn't look like the slide attempted to go forward. Not as reliable as we would like, but certainly not unreliable either. I will let you guys decide down below what you think of that. The vast majority of the ammo that we've put through it has been MagTech 230 grain. We also put some S&B 230 grain full metal jacket through it, as well as Fiocchi 185 grain hollow points. I'm not even sure if they make that load anymore, but we put about 50 rounds of the hollow points through it. Those had 0 issues, so I guess that's good. With defensive loads, it's been 100% reliable so far, so there is that. Price point on the gun, unfortunately, they are not all that cheap. Right now, the Gen 5 MOS versions basically all come in at $620. So while it is a very proven design, a well-made design that I like, again, I like Glocks. If you look at some of the competitive offerings to what these guys are putting out now, there's a lot of competitors that are going to come in at a lower price point, probably less so in the 45 caliber market than like the 9mm, for example, but there definitely are some other good ones that are very price competitive with it. But again, they don't have the reputation that Glock has, which has been built over decades at this point of proven performance. So I won't take that away from them as well. All in all, I like the gun for the size and weight that it is. The recoil impulse is pretty darn good, and that comes down to a few things, obviously, I should say. Number one, Glocks have relatively low bore access. The recoil spring, the way they sprung it, if you will, on the Gen 5s is pretty good as well. And if you compare it to like a 1911 that weighs a lot more, it's going to be very, very competitive in terms of recoil impulse and just pleasure of shooting. And with that, guys, I think that's pretty much all we have for the video today. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, you can always post them down below in the comment section. Best place to reach me though, however, is on my various social media pages. I prefer the non-Zuckerberg Meta ones because those ones people actually can see. I'm not totally censored on them. What a crazy concept. So if you're not following me over there though, please do so. If there's sales on ammo, optics, etc., any of that stuff, those will be in my social media first. And then if you guys like this type of video and you're not subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Additionally, hit the notification bell just to kind of double tap on it. If you've done that and you're not seeing 2 to 4 videos a week here on the channel, you can sign up for my email list at the website here on your screen. This website has also been revamped lately, so we have a lot of cool stuff going on over there. Even if you're already signed up, I would recommend heading over there, but you can head over there, sign up for the email. That email goes out once a month, has all of the videos since the previous month's email has gone out, so that way there's not a big tech giant censoring your eyes from my content. Additionally, if you guys like deals, ammo, optics, guns, lasers, whatever the case may be, night vision, any of that kind of stuff, we have a daily deals email. It goes out every single day, as the name indicates, has 8 of the best deals that we find around the internet. If it is in that email, it's the cheapest I know of anywhere on the internet on that particular day for that item, because I've already done the price comparisons for you, so that way it saves you guys some time and some money as well. So daily deals email is fire. There's also a good meme in there, which everyone likes. So with that, I'm going to close it out. Thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate it. I look forward to seeing everybody in the next video.